Okay, so mindfulness, being an artist. Let's talk about it. I've been performing music since I was a teenager, and I've been practicing mindfulness pretty seriously since around the same time. And I'm 35 now, so that's a bit of time to have a perspective on this. I want to talk about 3 ways that I believe mindfulness helps me as an artist and as a creative person in general. Before I get into that, I want to explain by mindfulness what I mean is sitting down, dropping everything else. So any activities, the phone, just everything, just stopping everything, just sitting there, being present, and deliberately practicing being present. So when my mind wanders off to think about the future or the past, choosing to bring my attention, my awareness back into the present moment, back into my body. So that's the practice that I'm referring to, okay? Okay, so let's jump into it. Number 3, dealing with self-doubt. Now, as an artist, it's easy to get into a thing where, for me at least, becoming overly critical of my own creative expression. So being really harsh on, oh, this art isn't good, or oh, this, what I'm working on sucks. Another way this can come up is just negative stories that I might tell myself, like, oh, I'm too old for this, or other ones that artists have. Let's see. So, oh, I don't have enough talent for this. There's a million stories you might tell yourself, about why you shouldn't make art, or your art's not good. Or, anyways, this negative stories and this self-doubt can absolutely get in the way of creating art and enjoying the process, and it can even get in the way of ever finishing something. It's like if you're always having this harsh critique of yourself, you'll never get through to the point where you're actually finished with a piece of work. So this is a huge obstacle. So how mindfulness helps me with this is, one of the main things that I've learned through practicing mindfulness is that a thought is actually just a thought. Like, all these thoughts come up, all these emotions come up, and that doesn't mean that they're true. So just because I'm thinking something just because I'm feeling a certain way doesn't mean that that thought and that emotion are really a good reflection of the truth, of the reality. So by practicing in this way of seeing a thought as a thought, letting it come, letting it go, not being so fixated on this is true, but just letting it happen, it gives room for things to change, essentially. It gives room for my inner emotional and mental landscape to go through the changes and not be so stuck in one thing. It's also easier for me to see when these stories or negative views of myself or my art are actually coming up and starting to get in the way. So maybe it would be easy to almost not even fully realize, oh my gosh, I'm thinking all these negative things, until you sit down and start practicing mindfulness, and then you see, oh my gosh, you become very aware of all the thinking that's going on and how much kind of bullshit there is in there, where it's like, that's just bullshit. Honestly, there's nothing true about that. That's just some negative opinion that I picked up somewhere. So it helps me to have more awareness of these negative thought patterns, and it also helps me kind of let them go and not get so dragged down by them. All right, so number 2, the second way that mindfulness helps me as an artist is giving life a sense of direction. So basically, like, it's easy as an artist, I think, to kind of get lost. Like, what am I doing? What is, at a certain point, maybe, there's an initial excitement, like, oh my gosh, I'm, going to learn how to play guitar or whatever. And then you learn it to a certain degree, and then you're like, wait, what am I really doing? I don't know. And it can be easy to get into a state where it's like, I don't know the full direction of what I'm even trying to do. And then that can turn into procrastination, or just never continuing on with your art because you're not really sure what's the point or what direction you're trying to go anyways. Then again, other times can be a lot of clarity. Like, oh my gosh, I'm working on this project. I want to finish this album. And it's all full steam ahead and you have clarity. But then you finish the album and then it's like, well, now what do I want to do? Now, this is a bigger problem for some people than others. Some people have a natural sense of like inspiration and direction with their art. But I think a lot of people, myself included at times, have felt like a little bit lost in terms of my direction as an artist. So how has mindfulness helped me with that is it gives this overall, like, larger zoomed out sense of direction to my life. So for example, I know that I'm somewhere on the process from being totally scattered mentally, just all over the place emotionally, to working slowly towards unifying my being. Now, I'm not going to get into all the dimensions of what that means, but just broadly speaking, that's the direction of my life. Like everything else that's going on is fitting into that larger process. So the way that translates into art is that I don't rely on my artistic process to give me this sense of meaning or direction. Like I'm getting that from mindfulness and other practices that I do. The art then is a way that I can express myself. It's a way that I can explore. It's a way I can give to the world. I'm not putting pressure on it to give me direction or to give me answers to my life. So that's a real benefit to the practice of mindfulness. Okay, so now the last one is separating myself from my work. The trap here is thinking that your art is you. So if you write a shitty song, that means somehow you're a shitty person. I mean, most people don't go around thinking that, but it's like that's the emotional weight. Is like if my art isn't perfect, that means I'm not perfect. I need to create perfect art so that the world sees me as a perfect person. That's a problem because actually, who you are and the art that you create are not the same thing. If all of your paintings burned up in a building, that doesn't mean that you no longer are alive. It's your art is separate from you. You're not the same. But emotionally, it can be very easy to fall into this feeling that I am my art. And if people love my art, they love me. If people don't love my art, they don't love me. And that obviously puts too much weight on creating art. And the more intense weight that you put on your existence is tied into the creation of my perfect art. That's a recipe for making weird art, probably, or I don't know, just having a strange skewed view of who you are and a strange view of kind of your value inherently as a person, regardless of your artistic expression. Okay, so mindfulness helps me with this piece of separating myself from my work because essentially the practice of sitting down, dropping all other activities and distractions, and just literally being in the present moment, being with myself, it separates me completely from my creative process, from my artistic expression. Like I don't have to be creative. I don't have to come up with something special. I don't have to do any of that. No one's watching me. It's not a performance. Like there's no one else is even perceiving me. I'm literally just perceiving my own thoughts, emotions, and physicality. That's it. There's nothing else going on. And so through building that relationship with myself, what happens is over time, I've developed a sense of more and more safety within myself. I'm not relying on getting good feedback, getting praise, or getting a compliment, or being seen. Essentially, I'm just learning how to be okay with what is. So all of this just helps me to remember, once I'm done practicing mindfulness and I'm back to my art practice or whatever, that at the end of the day, making good art or bad art, if people love it or don't love it, it actually doesn't change who I am, and it doesn't change the value that I have as a person. These are tough lessons. I'm not saying I've mastered all of these lessons and that I don't struggle with anything as a person or as an artist. I certainly do. But mindfulness, day in and day out, is something that helps me again and again. Whenever these issues come up, which they do, I have a way of applying a practice that is deeply, deeply nourishing to me and has helped me through many phases of life. So I thought I'd share that if that's interesting. I guess if you're interested in mindfulness, I'm thinking about putting together some type of thing, like maybe some type of resource for teaching mindfulness to some degree, maybe to artists and specifically. So if you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description box. You can click that and we can be in touch about that. Okay, that's all.